I'm Alex, that's Eileen, and you're watching Straight to the Chicane podcast. And if you guys are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that talks about Formula One, and we try to keep up to date on all the races. And today we're going to be talking about the
Australian GP.
That's right, the Australian GP. Thank you, Eileen. Honestly, we are a little sleep deprived from it. Here in the East Coast of the United States, we watch it live at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then with all the red flags that everybody know and watch.
It does feel like every time there's a night race for us, that it's like delayed for weather.
It is.
Or there's red flags or something. So it's like a 4-hour debacle.
I mean, it was pretty late. I struggled to make it to the end.
You were struggling at the beginning.
Yeah. Back and forth,
But we survived.
Yes.
We survived.
I think going into the week, we got a couple news things saying that they were talking about getting rid of practice, doing less practice, and then some of the drivers were saying that that they were okay with that. They don't need the practice.
Well, it's interesting. So I think there's going to be some type of reward or something for them to have less practice, is what Stefano is presenting.
Yeah.
But I think we've already cut practice in half in the last couple years ago.
It used to be 90-minute practices.
Yeah, so now it's less time. But, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of important stuff that goes into those days.
Yeah, it definitely helps the engineers and the people behind the scenes that helps them out for, predicting what's going to happen in the race. And maybe it makes it too easy for teams. Mm-hmm. I think that the drivers get enough practice in the in the simulators. Mm-hmm. But I think it might be interesting. As a fan, I want to watch them more. I want to get more on track.
I don't want them to get rid of it. I mean, I think that there's it's only an hour per session.
Yeah.
And so maybe they only need I think George Russell said they only needed one.
Sure.
But then they're not going to be able to go into the garage and change setup and do all this other stuff. They have to really master it before. And they do a lot of quality testing and then long run testing, different tire testing. So I don't think it's feasible. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe we test it and we see what it looks like, but there's definitely no way they can get rid of it.
You're right. You need some sort of practice for both A, for testing, and for B, for fans. And it's a weekend event, so there has to be more things. It's not just qualifying in the race. I think now that they are introducing the sprint stuff, and there's been talk now of, what this format of the sprint races are going to look like. Mm-hmm. There's been talk of doing, qualifying just for sprints and keeping that separated for, and then qualifying for the race too. So
I think what they also have to factor in too is what are they going to replace the practices with? Because, I mean, we saw this weekend, this is the biggest. I feel like it's every year it's getting bigger and bigger, but this is the biggest Australian Grand Prix with record-breaking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday attendance. So it's how are you going to keep them engaged? There's F2 and all the other stuff, the Porsche series and everything, but, most people are there for F1.
Yeah.
You're paying the big bucks for F1.
I mean, there was F3, F2, and like you said, the Porsche series. I think you're right. We want to see more F1.
I did a poll on our Instagram. The majority don't want to get rid of practice. I think everyone out there probably enjoys watching practice, whether you're watching it live, watching it while you're driving home, whatever the case may be. It keeps you entertained. And I know your big thing with practice is you find out all the inside stuff. You find out about the engine penalties. You find out about, changes or upgrades or things that are coming. So, I think it's important for us too.
It is, because now you see... Because it kind of dives more into what each team is doing and what the issues are. Because there are so many limitations on parts that they can use, and I don't always follow all the FIA press releases, so I rely on some of the broadcasters from the practice times to tell me, to let me know what's going on.
Yeah.
So
So we have that. So potentially practice is changing, but. We obviously are going into a higher amount of sprint races. I feel like we've talked about sprint races so much. I already know your opinion, but they're presenting the new format that could potentially be at the next race in Baku. So we have our first sprint in 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's at the next race.
The next race, which feels like an eternity away. But so they're basically what they're presenting as a change would be Friday, they would have one practice session, and then they would have qualifying for the race on Sunday. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's a pretty big change. Saturday, they would have just a small qualifying session in the morning to qualify for the sprint race. But the rumor is that it would be one round of qualifying. So, like, just wherever you qualified. Then you'd have the sprint race, and then Sunday would still be the main event.
Yeah.
That's a lot of action.
That is a lot of action. I think that's plenty of action. And if that's
Is it too much?
We'll find out. I mean.
Well, they haven't confirmed that they're going to do it just yet.
Yeah.
And the drivers are very conflicted. So we heard from Max many times.
He doesn't like it, but he doesn't like sprint races. So.
He doesn't like sprint races. And for me, I kind of agree with him and Christian, too, because Christian was like, it's ludicrous to test this new format in Baku, of all places. It's a street track with crazy, we typically always have red flags there. Somebody always bins it.
There's usually...
So we're going to have a high, speed sprint race, mm-hmm. and then an extra qualifying session. And so the concern is the cost cap.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've raised it a little bit for other reasons, too, so they could always raise a little bit the cost cap if they want to try something like that. But
yeah, but still, it's a risk that they're taking to...
Yeah. I mean...
For the pure entertainment.
FIA, F1, Liberty Media, they're trying to balance what fans want, because it's, now it's blowing up so much. Mm-hmm. And then they got to also balance, these budgets and the expectations of these teams. And the teams are expecting to spend X amount of money on other things.
Right.
And then they get, we're already in the start of the season. They should have already figured that out before the season started, so they could have allocated money probably better for the teams.
Well, we saw them raise the cost cap last year,
Exactly.
So who's to say that they don't do it again this year? But I think it's interesting. I think
they will,
I think that it would be really busy. And for me, I'm like, if they go that direction, we're obviously going to the U.S. Grand Prix, so it'll be a very fun weekend to see double qualifying, 2 races. It'll be great for us,
yeah.
But I get it from a driver perspective. Max was like, it's just a survival race. You're just basically trying to survive with the least amount of damage. And based on what we saw today in our or should I say yesterday, I don't know when the race took place for us.
It was today. I mean, it was just in the morning.
Right, but when it's just crazy, lasts, only a couple laps and everybody's all out, it's kind of carnage.
Yeah, so speaking of this week, because, it was carnage and chaos.
Yeah.
And
I did not expect the Australian Grand Prix to be this wild.
Yeah. Let's get into the whole entire weekend. There's a lot to unpack a little bit because Valtteri struggled at times.
Valtteri did not have a good weekend at all.
No, and then either did Sergio. His weekend was kind of hit or miss, even though he finished good. He went from 20th to 5th, and I would say that's great.
Sergio was having a good weekend.
His practice 3 and qualifying, awful.
Well, yeah. His Saturday was awful.
Saturday was bad.
So something happened with the car. They were tearing it apart and putting it back together. There was some type of an issue with his brake, so it caused the engine to still be pushing while he was braking.
He's been talking about that car having issues for a while.
Yeah, Toto has it printed out. The car is not right.
Yeah.
So, coming off of last week when he won, kind of expecting he was 1 point off the championship to still be in contention. Mm-hmm. I know that we were excited about that because we're like, oh my God, Red Bull's going to run away with it, but it'll be good to see the teammates battling. At least they're very close. And so it was kind of a bummer to see. Still only race 3. Sergio did have a good comeback. There was a lot of factors that tied into it. Mm-hmm. But he did finish P5, so damage control. Yeah, damage control for him. That's the only thing you can say, and that's what he says, too. And but yeah, his practice 3 was just tough. Yeah, he was
missing apex, he was braking late, missing braking points.
There was something wrong with his setup.
I know, and he kept saying it, and so I guess they figured it out enough for the race this weekend that he was able to make moves and not really have too much of an issue with brakes.
Yeah. I don't know. What are your thoughts about Red Bull and the drivers? I know going into this weekend, you said you think this is it for Sergio.
I did. I do. I think there's something in the water. The writing's on the wall.
I feel like there's just a lot of like, oh no, we're backing each other 100%. Oh no, like they just feel like they have to keep talking about it, like to over publicize it.
I think their car's good.
Their car is very good.
I think, but there's some tension in the air for sure. There's an elephant in the room.
There definitely is.
Whatever you want to call it.
Definitely is.
I don't know. But I did say that I do think it's Sergio's last season with Red Bull, and I think
you think Ricardo's coming back?
Daniel's poised to have that seat. I do.
I know, but can you forget the drama with Max and Daniel at the end? I mean, Daniel's saying says it's looking good for 2024 to come back in a top team. So unless he's going to Mercedes and taking Lewis's seat or Ferrari,
I don't know.
I think it's probably Red Bull.
Yeah, I do too. So other things kind of happening during practices. One, we saw Albon kind of doing all right.
Doing all right? What do you mean he was the star? He did great.
See?
He did great. I think it was a tough weekend based on the race, but for qualifying, he ended up in Q3. He lined up next to Charles Leclerc.
He did, but even practices, he was looking pretty good.
He was purple in the middle sector every single time in qualifying. Yeah. It was like the Alex Albon sector.
So he, tough luck for him during the race here this weekend. Definitely kind of came into
lost
the rear, came around and caused one of the red flags, which we'll talk about here a little more in a little bit. And he practiced stuff more. Mercedes kind of seemed like they were like maybe hiding something.
They seemed okay in practice.
That's right.
Like normal.
It seemed like, all right, here we go, another week with the team kind of struggling a little bit.
Yeah, they haven't
trying
changed
to figure
anything.
it out still. And qualifying.
I mean, practice was normal. Practice 2 had rain, so it was kind of like, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, so they weren't really doing a whole lot of stuff. There wasn't, I figured that more of the rookies would have been out during the rain just to get rain experience. I don't know how much they're out in the rain during when they're in F2 and F3 and, some of the older guys, they didn't have that, but other series. But, you hear like Lewis kind of grew up racing in the rain. You hear other people like even Lance Stroll, like you hear him, he grew up racing a lot in the rain, and that's why he kind of does do really well in the rain. Max raced a lot in the rain, and so I wonder if some of these other rookies like Logan Sargent, who wasn't just like a champion in F2, a champion in F3 that could go and need that experience, and they were just not all the cars were out there for all that rain.
Yeah. But other than that, it was like a typical Red Bull, Alonso. We did see a little bit better progress from Mercedes, but they were even expecting themselves to be between P5 and P7. So similar to last week. And then we go into qualifying, and it's a different story. So qualifying, I guess for Q1, the big set was Sergio was out.
Yeah, Sergio.
Not even a lap.
So Sergio just came right out of P3, right into qualifying, and pretty much just same exact issue, binned it, and really just didn't set himself for failure and put it right in the rocks, in the gravel. And he was done. After that, they red flagged that session and got him out.
Lots of red flags.
Yeah.
I feel like the theme of this weekend was just a giant red flag.
I think there was more red flags due to, because it's typically not like that. Because last year when they changed a little bit of the course to make it a little bit faster in certain areas, and then B, they added the 4th DRS this year. So I think just there was a lot. They said it saved over a second off of the time with the DRS.
Okay.
So they were just moving a lot faster through the course. And it's wild that,
You okay?
Yeah, this is wild,
So Q1, I don't think there was anything other spectacular that came out of it. We saw, the Williams not get through?
Yeah.
Sargent.
Yeah.
and we saw the two Alfa Romeos who are having a tough start to the season. We're both out. I think they were P19 and 18. So tough. Valtteri, love him. We should protect him at all costs, but he's got to, focus, grind, get back to it. We know he can be in the points.
Yeah, so I would say, he arrived in Australia and got a hometown welcome for some reason.
With his mullet,
and then he had the biker tan from wearing his biker shirts and stuff like that.
And on his flip-flops.
And they embrace him very much so.
He's an honorary Australian citizen.
He is. And then, Oscar Piastri finally getting to actually race in his hometown for the first time. And, this is his first home race. So he... there was a lot of McLaren 81 hats.
There was, yeah.
A lot,
yeah, they're out there big. So, but, he didn't have a great qualifying session either. McLaren didn't look much different this weekend. Neither one of them got through. Lando got into Q2, but this is his third race in a row that he has not gotten into Q3 for the first time in his F1 career. So, unusual. And then we had a lot of people that were, super close. Like in Q2, Ocon just got knocked out by 7 thousandths of a second or something crazy. So it was very, very close. So, drivers just missing out. I would say Hülkenberg was the star for Q3 to get through. So that was impressive.
So this is now the third week in a row that Nico has outqualified his teammate Kevin. So is that something to be talked about over there at their camp?
Probably.
Because last year it was Mick and Kevin looked like a stud. He came out with, pretty much no regrets, living all on the line.
Getting called up last minute.
And I feel like, I don't know if that spark has gone away but something's changed because the car is there. Actually, Haas has a pretty good car.
Right.
Throughout the race this weekend, they were sitting fourth, and there was a moment Nico was in third on the podium.
Well, no.
For a brief moment.
No, that was with the penalty, but he was in fourth. He was in fourth after 5 cars DNF'd on that last lap. So, okay. But
he was in the points.
He was in the points. He got into Q3, so that's impressive. So it's there definitely in the package. But hey, it's only race 3. We'll see what happens with Kevin, but good weekend for Nico. And then, I guess the big surprise for us was the Mercedes qualifying 2 and 3.
I think it was just wild because a brief moment in Q3 of qualifying, Lewis had the fastest time.
He was on provisional pole. Alonso was P2.
And with a couple minutes left, however, of course, Max was still laying down his time, and he did put down a hell of a time. Yeah,
the struggle this weekend was.
We're all struggling.
I know, my brain's a little slow, but the struggle was the tire temperature this weekend. So everyone had to do
it was just cool temperatures.
Their first lap was slower. They couldn't really get the tires going. And then their second lap was their better lap where they had better grip. So you saw them really come in. So I think that's why Max had a tougher lap. And then it all came together to put him on pole.
And you're right. And honestly, they were even doing more than 2 laps. They were doing the warm up, a hot lap, a warm up, a hot lap. And then they were doing 3 to 4 laps before they were coming in to change the tire.
Yeah.
Well,
some of them were saying that they preferred the used tires, that they had better grip on used tires. That's why we saw the Aston start on used tires today, which was crazy. So, but with that being said, the weekend weather was kind of unusual.
It was up and down.
And And I'm like, so we obviously saw some rain. I think it rained that morning in the F2 race before qualifying. And so they were expecting rain to come at the end of qualifying in Q3. So Ferrari being Ferrari told Leclerc that he had to push on his first lap. And so he did. And it didn't work out so well. And then Carlos ended up getting in his way in turns 3 and 4. And so just sounds like some more miscommunication at Ferrari.
Yeah, just bad strategy.
Just terrible start for Charles, and you got to feel for him.
Yeah, he got hit.
Well, in the race today, yes, but I mean, even setting him up for qualifying. Yeah.
He's had a tough time. He even said it in an interview today that
it's been the worst. It's been his worst start. Yeah. No, I know. It's tough.
I feel bad Ferrari fans. They got it tough right now.
Now, I will say that Max DNF'd in Bahrain and in Australia last year, and he won the championship.
Yeah.
Not looking like that will be the same factor for Charles this year, but
there would need to be a lot to happen for Max not to win this right now. He's setting himself up pretty well.
Well, he's not running away with it yet.
Not yet, but it's another weekend like this with some crazy chaos in it, and carnage. Mm-hmm. He's gonna start to run away with it because number 2 is what, Sergio still?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're like 20 points difference.
Okay.
It's not okay. I am not going to be a pessimist about this season and be like Red Bull's going to win every single race.
Well,
I hope they don't because it won't make it fun for us. But I also think that there's a lot of teams that are going to be developing their car, and I think the cost cap is definitely going to come into play at some point for them.
For sure, you're right.
So yes, their car, and they still were dominant this weekend. I mean, Max. Granted, we had all these crazy red flags. He still would have finished 11 seconds ahead is where he was at. But last weekend, it was 20 seconds. So maybe we're making a little bit of margin. And we also saw some closer times with qualifying. Whereas last week, it was like Max was 5/10 up on Sergio.
Yeah.
And then we saw, like, basically everybody else was very close. So there's some positive things. Could be track specific.
I think it's more. I think it's a little bit track specific on this one, and the fact that this is the first time they had the 4 DRS zones, and so
I mean, kind of excessive a little bit.
I mean, it had to make it fun. Had to make it. Fast.
4 DRS zones and like.
But
nobody like had DRS. So Pierre.
There was a little bit of a train at some point.
There was a little bit. There was maybe 2 drivers that had DRS for a decent amount. Pierre being one of them, which he had a great drive today. And that was pretty much it. Lewis never got it. Maybe Alonso got close enough, but then he was pretty much 1.5 to 2 seconds back. And then, sure, as Perez was kind of chomping through the field, yeah, he was getting DRS, but everybody else, it was like a second. It was definitely like a train of cars, but we didn't really see a whole lot of like close racing. I mean, unless you think differently.
I mean,
besides all the crashes.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a little bit of action in between those red flags.
Yeah.
But yeah, the big thing is coming out of qualifying that Mercedes was 2-3.
Yeah. And I think Alonso and Carlos, they did an interview together after qualifying, and it was like the way that Mercedes talks about their car, they act like they're not going to make it out of Q1. And they have a fast car.
They do.
So.
They just got to figure out a couple more things.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what their upgrades are and what direction they go.
So do you think the upgrades are going to come to Baku?
No. I think they're going to come like race 5 or 6, like Imola.
Where are they going after Baku? I forget.
Miami.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's Miami, then Imola. So I'm like, it's probably what the start of the season sounded like Imola was going to have the majority. Now,
because they're coming back to Europe.
Yes. I think McLaren is bringing updates to Baku. So we'll see. I just don't think it's a type of circuit that you'll see a big changes in Baku with some of their updates. So that's probably why Mercedes decided not to.
Another street course.
I know. So many. It's crazy. So, but yeah, so the race, let's get to the race.
Okay.
Because Lord knows there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so the beginning of the race, right at the start, it was lights out, and Max seemed to not have the best start, or at least George had a really good start. Lewis had a pretty good start. Who else was there? Alonso
had a good start.
It was all of them had a really good reaction time and were off the line quick, and it seemed like maybe Max was just not quite on the reaction time as fast, because typically Max would cut all the way over, and his plan was to cut all the way over to try to take the inside a little bit to block, but George was there, and Max had to give him his space, and Max gave a lot of space this weekend.
He did. Yeah.
He's really trying to. I think he's really more conscious of I need every point I can get to the championship. You know what I mean?
Championship mentality.
It is. It's different. So they gave a little bit more room, and that essentially Max being on the outside allowed George to kind of take and cut off. And take
George braked late, which Max is typically a late breaker, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I feel like we saw him brake early a lot this week.
He did break. He was worried about his tires not being warm enough. And honestly, that first start of the very first race, I think all the tires were actually in the best position compared to all the other restarts that we got.
I don't know. But so George took the lead right away.
And kind of went away with it.
He did. And so then it was, basically turn 2. Then we get up to turn 3. Same thing. Max braked early. Lewis braked late. Came up on the inside. Was right alongside him. Let us know if you think he was alongside him or who was ahead.
It was
Did Lewis push Max wide?
No, it was clean. They gave each other room.
Very respectful this weekend.
Lewis could have definitely pushed him off the track even more if you wanted to.
And Max could have been more aggressive.
For sure. And no, they gave each other some space, and it just being on the side, Max again on the rumble strips, the little sausage curb, whatever you want to call it, that is next to the actual gravel. He went up on it, so it kind of slows you down, kind of takes your less traction. So he had to give up that space, but it wasn't so bad that Lewis was just gone because that Red Bull car is still very fast.
No, but it was a Mercedes 1-2 for a few laps there. So I
was excited.
It was interesting. Now I was like, well, we all know Max is still going to catch him, but it is what it is. But so same thing, turn 3 is where we saw Leclerc go off. And gravel trap,
he kind of went in and got hit and went backwards. Stroll hit him.
He did.
And went backwards into the gravel track, and that's where he ended.
And my initial reaction was, Carlos, no!
Yeah.
I literally said it because I'm so used to Carlos being in the gravel trap, and it was Leclerc. So...
so that's where Leclerc DNF'd on lap 1. And, that was another start of the race with Ferrari having a struggle. You're right about that. And then, but did they investigate that and they just gave that a racing incident?
It was a racing incident, yes.
That's what I thought. Yeah. That's right. Because I was like, that's definitely was probably Stroll's fault. But,
it was
always like the lap one.
So what happened was Alonso slowed down. Stroll didn't have anywhere to go. And so there was the incident with Leclerc. And Leclerc even said no fault to Stroll. It is what it is. But
it's a bummer.
It's definitely a bummer. I feel like.
But other than that, it was fairly clean first lap. Other than that, because it was on after that.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, Russell was going. You could see Max getting closer. He was in DRS. But we, of course, had the safety car. So
that's the thing is, George was, comfortably in the lead. I think they were probably trying to conserve the tire and plan out what the situation was going to be. Because they weren't under second. He wasn't fighting off.
No. At one point,
and then I think I wish we would have had all the radio for Mercedes.
At one point, Lewis was fighting with George, but George was told
to help.
No, he wasn't told to help. He was told to not overuse his tires. And he's like, how am I supposed to not when I have to battle my teammate? What's going on here? So then you saw it kind of slow back a little bit. But they were within 0.3. He was very, very close. And so the battle was there. And I think it's because Lewis was pushing because Max is pushing him. And so they're like, we need to give it. But then, a couple laps, he did have about a second gap.
Yeah. And then, lap 7 came around. And that's where Alex Albon bend it, lost the rear and came around a corner at a high speed and went pretty much backwards into a wall.
Yeah.
Hit the wall kind of hard and spun around a little bit and then kind of went back into the racing line through gravel everywhere. There was...
Yeah, it was kind of scary. It looked... Nico came around and there was dust and barely was able to...
Was it a McLaren that went?
It was an Alpine.
It was an Alpine. It was Gasly. It was Pierre Gasly that went through first, just got a face full of fucking rocks for sure. For sure. And then, right behind him was Nico. And that was definitely worthy of a red flag because the cars on a racing line, there was a lot of debris, gravel
there
everywhere.
was like debris from the car because
And
it was a pretty big impact. And so it wasn't just the gravel. They had to get the little sweeper truck out. And so
yeah, that was a worthy red flag. But
they dropped the safety car. They yellow flagged it first.
They yellow flagged it, and because of where George was, it was perfect timing with the yellow flag for him to pit. Because as soon as the yellow flag came out, they called him in, and it would have been perfect timing for him. It worked out. So, you're right. George Russell pitted, came in, and put on a set of hards, where then Lewis Hamilton became the race leader on his tires, and then Max stayed out as well. And a few other people came in and pitted behind them. And then they kind of went back out and kind of did another lap, and I think it wasn't a full lap. Maybe it was like a half lap.
It was long enough for the announcers to be like, "Oh man, this really messed up Lewis's strategy because now they can't work together as a team."
Yep.
And then it was like red flag, and then it was like, "Well, this just played nicely into their hands."
It's crazy because I called the red flag as soon as it happened. I don't know if you remember me saying it. I was like, "Oh, that's a red flag," and then
I thought you were sleeping.
Oh wow!
I'm just teasing.
It definitely was.
No, it definitely, there was so much gravel on there. But some of the drivers are saying that it wasn't worthy of a red flag. So
I disagree. I think that where the car was, they would needed to get personnel out there, and I wouldn't have wanted to see all that gravel out on that track while they're doing more laps. You know what I mean?
Right.
It would have caused something. So I think that was the right move, for sure. So that was
red flag number 1.
And then everybody went to pretty much hard tires during the red flag. Everyone went on a new set of hards. And then the announcers are like, there's talk of them being able to get 40 to 45 mile laps on each of these hard tires. So then, that's it for the pit stops then, really. If they can serve it correctly, that we weren't going to see any more pit stops. So that ruined it for George.
Yeah.
Completely.
Well, I don't think that ruined it for George.
Well, he was no
engine catching on fire ruined it.
Sure, but
because he was kind of on the charge. So listen, everybody, we figured we weren't even going to see pit stops from anyone at this point.
Sure.
Because everybody came in, everybody changed their tires, they went out, did another standing start. Max was able to hold on to the lead. Or no, Lewis.
Lewis was for a minute.
Yeah, for like a few laps.
Once DRS got engaged, it was pretty much over.
Yeah, it was like 2 laps after DRS. Then Max was like, all right, see ya. And it was funny because they were so close together for like the first 15 laps or whatever. And then it was like as soon as he got past him, was in clear air.
It was
like immediately 1 lap, 2 seconds.
Yeah, it was like a slingshot.
Yeah,
he did the slingshot around Lewis.
Slingshotted himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was gone, and it was just progressively getting bigger and bigger. And then
got to 8 seconds?
It got to 11 seconds. Yeah, it got to 11 seconds. And then we saw him go off the track.
He made a mistake.
Yeah, so I was like, oh my God, something's wrong with Max's car because they're never showing him because he's so far ahead.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at the times, and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? What just happened? It's going down and down. And I'm like, oh my God. And then they cut to him and they're like, oh, he must have just had a spin or he went off the track.
Yeah. Later we saw he went off the track.
Yeah, he did. He said that, I think he braked late, didn't want to lock up the tire, flat spot it, so he just cut the grass for Melbourne.
Sometimes he's smart, man, young Kai.
Yeah. No, hey, he knows he was at an advantage of having that lead. And so why, do something that's going to affect your race. So it was the smart thing to do. But so that kind of closed it up a little bit more. Then it was like, what was it? Lap 56?
Lap 56.
56. Magnussen hits the wall.
Hits the wall by himself.
I don't think he realized he hit the wall. And so
he said he didn't feel it, really.
Was it the sun blinding him and he just didn't realize? And then how do you not realize your tire just flew off?
You're right. There was a lot of talk of the sun getting low and it could be in people's eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that affects them so much. Maybe a little.
Yeah. Well, I think it did because they even said with the last lap that there was, some hard sun issues that were affecting, I think the Alpine said it. So, but yeah, so his wheel flies off. Crazy. He pulls over. Another red flag. with 2 laps left to go.
So was that worthy of a red flag? Because now you're right. There's 2 laps left. They could have finished the race under the safety car, and that would have been perfectly fine because it was just a tire carcass and a little bit of debris. Mm-hmm. And then the car, I don't know where he put the car. He drove it around a little bit.
Yeah, because he didn't realize. So I think
I got 3 wheels.
Yeah, he drove off to a little area that I feel like was safe enough to probably pull it.
So do you think there should have been a red flag here at that point?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think what they tried to do was, because no matter what, someone's going to be mad about the direction that it took, whatever. Do we finish under a safety car? Do we red flag it so there's a race and we, have entertainment for, people? What do we do? And so we've seen this, many cases in the last few years. And so, I don't know. I feel like they just threw the red flag because...
So they threw the red flag for this.
Right away.
Purely because they want it to finish. They want these races to finish under green flag conditions. Mm-hmm. They want the fans to be excited that way, and that's what they want to offer to us fans.
I don't know if that's purely the reason.
I think so.
Nobody told us that, so there's no way for us to determine if that's the reason that they did it. I think they're like, it was a big shunt. It's in the wall. The barrier, is the barrier damaged? Do we have to assess it? Is the car going to be left out on track?
Yeah, but again...
There's a tire, and they said that under red flag circumstances, if there's a tire or large debris, that they'll typically red flag it. So
yeah, I mean, they're overly cautious. Fine, that's fine. That's,
And I feel like we've seen more red flags this year. I mean, we were 3 races in, but they're quick to throw it. They threw it during one of the practice sessions over one tiny piece of debris that was this big.
Practice sessions are different, though. They'll do that just for that so they can just get it cleaned up. So it's, easier to clean it up that way. I just think with the last 2 laps, we've also seen it last year, where they just kind of finished it under a yellow flag. And,
we did, yeah.
And that would have been okay, too, because they could have said, all right, nobody go out and get any of the stuff. We're just going to go on behind the safety car and finish the red flag behind the safety car.
Well, I think in retrospect, looking at it, they caused a red flag to do another standing start, which caused all the chaos because it's 1 lap left and people are balls to the wall, we're going to push it.
So
everyone's in contention to go for higher points, so let's go for it. So they kind of caused the carnage themselves.
So then they did a standing start, like you said, which is resetting it up. But going out to that standing start, they are being led by the safety car. And so the safety car cannot go as fast as what they would normally go during normal formation laps sometimes to warm up their tires, right? Or they, when they're behind the safety car, they have to stay within 10 lengths or they have to stay within a certain length, right? So lots of times you'll see them slow down, do a bunch of burnouts, brake real hard, burnouts, brake real hard, right? They can't do all that when they're behind the safety car.
But they can, because we determined that this race, after the first red flag, when Lewis was leading that, he was way back from the safety car.
Right.
Max came on the radio and was like, he can't do that. He's more than 10 car lengths.
We should do something about it. You're right.
Then they determined that Lewis was in the right and that he controls it.
Correct. I remember they said that.
Yes. So then Max was able to do that for this next one.
Then what did he do? He went fast. Did he go too fast? I don't understand, because none of the car tires were ready. And it was all out, like you said, just pure carnage. Logan Sargent running into debris.
I have no idea. I think everyone was it's the last lap. If I have a chance to get up there and there's I'm in a position where I can go for it, and I say I'm in 10th and I'm I want to get up to P6.
Yeah.
Now's the time. We've got 1 lap left. We're all on the same merit, low fuel, ready to go. New tires in most cases, because everybody swapped their tires too to softs.
They did.
And so it's I think it was tricky no matter how they did it. If Max went fast, then the rest of the grid comes up. Their tires are warmer. So I think it was a pretty average one. The one with Lewis got a little dangerous in the back half. Remember, all the cars that were at the back were basically stopped.
They did.
Cars were driving off into the gravel, passing each other.
That was rough.
So it was a little crazy. But, yeah, who knows? 3 red flags this race. We haven't even gotten to the third. So we're on the second red flag. We do the standing start. Max gets away. He's like, gone. See ya. Lewis has a great start too. He's gone. Not involved in the carnage.
Nope.
Then it's like, what? What was the first
Alonso
thing?
Alonso got hit by Carlos.
Yep.
And it was...
Flipped him, turned him around. He hit the wall.
So that was the first of the front runners that got hit. And then it was pretty much the Alpines.
So Gasly was P5, so he went off to avoid. He re-entered into Ocon, hit Ocon. At the same time that they were crashing into the wall, Sargent rear-ended Nick DeVries. Yep. They went off into the gravel. Stroll went wide. Perez went wide and went through the gravel.
And then Stroll went wide the next turn. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
The tires weren't warmed up, and it was just carnage and, chaos.
It was insane. So guess what? Red flag.
Yeah. Yep, red flagged on that. And so then what do you do? Because now there's the talk of, like, what happened again previously last year is that all this happened at Silverstone, and it all happened in red flag before anyone made it through the first sector. Mm-hmm. So what do? Everybody gets reset, so, And
Alonso kept his car going, so he was like,
so at that
why did they throw the red flag? The car's still going. The car's still going.
Yeah, but at that time, Nico was in third.
He was in fourth.
Oh, in fourth.
Carlos was in third.
Yeah. But, so then they threw it. Yeah. Again.
So at this point in the race, we have 8 DNFs because I don't know how we missed this and didn't speak to it. I kind of alluded at it, but we did see George Russell have his first mechanical failure. His engine was on fire, and so he was out after he was kind of on the charge back after, the tough safety car.
Sorry, we did forget.
So we had 8 DNFs at this point. We've got 12 cars running. Holy crap. So we go back into the pit lane. We've got 1 lap of racing, which now we all know the infamous, all we need is 1 lap of racing. So what are we going to do? Are they going to consult with Michael Massey? Because he was there. Yeah. What are we going to do? What's the best practice for us? Are we just going to finish under the safety car? So then it's like all this kerfuffle. Like we see the drivers like all out of their cars. Like I saw Lewis like stretching and giving people hugs. Like, people are congratulating Max. It's like, is the race over?
Is the race over? Should they just end it right now?
It's 4 a.m. at this point for us. So I'm like, you're like, this is crazy. I'm like, we've got to see this through. So
I know.
So then they're like, okay, here's the order. And it was just basically, we're putting everybody back into the order that we started the last standing start with, minus the cars that crashed.
And DNF'd, yeah.
But we're going to finish it under a safety car because the safety car has to take them out. So there's only 1 lap of racing left. So he's going to come in at the pit lane entry, and then it's that small little 100-yard dash that maybe we'll see some movement. Now, before we go out, they're lined up, and we hear Carlos gets a 5-second penalty. And I have never heard a driver as devastated. Well, maybe Lewis in Abu Dhabi. But Carlos was like, no, this is not right. This is not right. And it almost sounded like he was crying.
He was upset about it.
Like,
it should have been a racing incident because it's like a lap 1. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I think so too.
And I don't think it was necessarily all his fault because there was a lot going on.
And why, drop it right before they're going to go out and line up to do the lap? That's kind of what his thing was. Like, why didn't they just wait? Why didn't they just let us finish the race and then we can talk or we can, look at what happened type of thing? Yeah. So instead, he's like, okay, I'm going into this lap under a safety car where I've got basically to finish, I'm going to finish last place.
Yep. They completely ruined his race.
Yeah, so I know, but his engineer did say, well, it's there, we'll talk about it after. So, that it pretty much confirmed it was his fault, so. Sure. But I think it was so chaotic in that first turn. Where was he supposed to go? But I think he also was, coming in hot.
Yeah, they were all coming in hot.
They're all coming in hot, so.
All coming in hot.
So, that was it. It was wild. All the while, Sergio was coming from P20
up to P5. And then but he got helped out a lot by
he got helped out a lot, and then also just with the craziness that happened with the accidents. Gasly was running P5. He wouldn't have he wouldn't have gotten up to P5.
No.
So,
Right.
you know, like it was still, he was driver of the day. I don't really know who I wanted to be driver of the day.
Honestly, I'm just gonna stay with. I'm going with Lewis because I'm happy to see the car performing well. He didn't make too many mistakes.
Well, he didn't make any mistakes, according to Fernando, other than one lockup and like turn 5 and 58 laps.
Yeah. So I that's who my driver of the day is. I'm ready to see a win. We haven't seen it in a while. I think it's coming.
Yes.
And I think Max's car is still just very much unbeatable. That Red Bull is fast. However, he only beat Lewis by 1/10.
Wow.
So that's how I got to see it.
Okay, got it. No, I was happy. Lewis was like not going to give up to the end. He was like, you know what? I'm going for this 100-yard dash.
Yeah.
And he did. He went for it. If they didn't change the rule of, you know, being side by side, like after Abu Dhabi, you know, maybe there would have been a little battle there. But I also don't think Max was trying at the end.
No.
He was like, I got this in the bag.
Yeah.
So.
Craziness, kind of predictability because Max won again. Mm-hmm. Red Bull still reigns supreme currently.
They do, yes.
You know,
we did see McLaren get points.
we did, but
They
you
got
know,
12.
again, they got their points because there was a lot of carnage, and would they have gotten points if more teams finished?
Probably not.
So
They didn't look that like.
I mean, I'm happy Oscar Piastri got his points in his home race. Mm-hmm. Finally, for a rookie, that's good to see. I think what we need now is Logan Sargent, or did he already get his points? I can't remember if he got them last week.
No, he has not gotten any
So
points.
we need him still to get some points if he's going to continue on. He had some tough luck, ran into DeVries, and DeVries had some tough luck too.
Yeah, because he ran into it.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a bummer. So that kind of ends that. And so all the way over there in Australia, now we can kind of take what they call it, spring break, Easter break.
Is that what we're calling it?
That's what I've
I know
heard
it's because the Chinese Grand Prix fell off the list. So it was supposed to be within this period of time.
Yeah.
So we've got 4 weeks off.
Yeah.
A lot of wind tunnel time.
So speaking of all this time off, there was also news of there being 30 plus races possibly in the future. Because right now there's currently 23 plus
23.
sprints, which is a good amount. I don't think there needs to be maybe a couple more, maybe more, but not much more than that. Mm-hmm. I think I've said before, previous seasons on our podcast, maybe 25 or 26. I think I'll be happy with that's more than enough. You know,
30 is way too much. I get the demand is there. You know, like people are excited. I mean, even on the grid walk this week, we heard people continuously, oh, I used to like follow Formula One, but Drive to Survive really got me into it. Mm-hmm. So it's just going to continue to build from there. But I just like A, the travel, and B, like that's a lot of demand on drivers and the teams
and the families.
Yeah,
and how much money are they spending? And is it really truly? You know, are they going to be able to even achieve the green efficiency that, you know, carbon neutral that they want to do?
Right.
If they're going from, you know, the Middle East down to, you know, to Australia, from Australia back up to, you know, Baku over.
If
to
we're going
Miami,
from Vegas to Abu Dhabi,
you know what I mean?
you
Yeah.
know.
So like I understand like this is a world sport, and you know there could be a different avenue in it. But you know, again, they not only is it a world sport, they're also navigating seasonal weather, because you know you can't just show up, you know, at certain places in the middle of winter. Mm-hmm. You know, it just ain't gonna work. Or even like, you know, certain spring times or fall times because of weather. You know, look at what happens at Spa. Sometimes, you know, some days I bet certain seasons it rains every day.
It's not realistic. They have to figure out. I mean, yes, it's great that the fan base, everybody wants a Grand Prix.
Everybody.
But I mean, we have 3 in America. So I'm like, you know, we can't just keep adding it, because that does put more stress on just everybody that's involved in the process, but specifically the drivers.
Yeah, it's a lot.
You know?
I think over 30 is a lot. I think
that's 30 weeks out of the year. That's over half the year.
Yeah, I think it needs to be. I think you cap it at like 26, so like 25,
which is still a lot.
Yeah, plenty enough. I agree. So, yeah, I think if you guys made it this far, thank you very much. We appreciate you listening to our podcast. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify, and we can kind of get you wherever you guys listen to your podcast. We'll be taking a break with this spring break as well.
Yes. Hopefully it goes by fast.
I hope so, too.
We'll have a lot, I'm sure, that comes out to unpack over the next few weeks. But we want to thank our new subscribers. Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
All right. That's it for us. We'll catch you later. Bye.